In today's tutorial, I'll be showing you how to connect granny squares 3 different ways. Hi, I'm Heather and this is Hooking Winch Crochet. If you've been following along with the beginner series so far, then just last week you learned how to make the classic granny square. Hopefully you've been practicing and have a few of these ready to learn how to connect them to make blankets and garments like this halter top behind me, bags, any number of things. These are simple yet versatile. Once you learn the methods used for connecting them, you can check the internet for patterns for so many different things done with granny squares. So let's get started. The first method for joining granny squares I'm going to show you is with single crochet. That's the same method I used on this throw. As you can see, it creates this ridge. So you have like some texture to it. So if you have a couch like this one that's very, very flat, very smooth, there's no kind of texture to the fabric at all, you can throw that on there and it gives it a little bit more dimensionality, makes it pop a little bit. The reverse side of this, however, comes out very smooth. So you can actually decide which look is better for your decor, which way you want facing up. Same thing with the squares themselves. They have 2 sides. Typically, this is considered the right side, and then this one would be considered the wrong side. You see this kind of a more defined cross shape in the middle, and it's a little softer. You see the circle more. It's just a slightly different look. And held 2 opposite sides up side by side, you can maybe see it better. You can definitely see it in yours in person, I think. But you decide which one of those sides you consider your right side or your wrong side, which one you want showing when you put your throw or your blanket on display. The first thing I want you to do is look at your squares and decide what's going to be your right side, what's going to be your wrong side, or your front facing and back facing sides. And once you determine that, you'll be able to get started with connecting them. That's going to be very important with every method that you connect because you want all your squares facing the same way. For the single crochet method, now normally when I'm making a blanket, as you saw when I showed you the throw, I use the same color as the outside so it kind of blends, but I want you to see my work, so I'm using the color from the inside of my square for this, the flora. So you start by attaching in the corner, and you just go through the corner. You don't actually have to go through any stitches. Just pull it loop through, wrap around, and there you go. You could also just tie on with a knot. I try to avoid knots if I can, because this way I can just sew that tail through and it'll be snug when I'm done. You line it up. Now your squares are the same size, so you have the same number of stitches on each. And double check before you get started that your squares are facing the same way. So you should have your... If you want the ridge on the showing side, then your wrong sides should be facing each other and your right side should be facing out. And go through both loops of the stitch on both squares. So you have 2 V's on your hook. Yarn over, pull through. Then yarn over and pull through those 2 loops. Then the next stitch, through both, yarn over, pull through, through both loops, through both loops, 2 V's on the hook, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. Through both, through two. And just follow that pattern all the way down. And like I said, if your squares are the same size, you have the same number of stitches, it should work out nice and even and easy to line up. If you have locking stitch markers, sometimes people use those like in the corners to kind of hold it. And if you chained it too tight to get your hook through, in the chain spaces, you could just go through the space. You don't have to go through the stitches. But there's 2 stitches. You chain 2, so you put 2 there. You don't just do 1. You want to make sure it stays even and lined up. Top of that first double. Top of that first double. Just make sure you keep your stitches lined up. And as you can see, it's forming this nice ridge. And the other side, because I'm using the opposite color, doesn't look as nice as it does when you use the same one. But you can see it's kind of smoother. But your right side has a ridge. And we're just going to follow that all the way down. And then I'm going to show you, when you're making a blanket, first you connect your individual squares to make your rows, and then you connect your rows. And even though it's doing the same thing, sometimes it helps to see it, you know, the visual aid, kind of what do you do when you get to these parts. So once we're done connecting these two, I'll show you how to connect your rows together. I left one tail unsewn just to show you again how to sew ends in. I know we covered this in the Granny Squares tutorial, but in case you need a little refresher, just want to get it inside of that ridge as best we can. The more of your needle is showing on the outside, when you go through, the more of your yarn is going to be showing on the outside. So just want to avoid any big streaks of color. Get it really inside the ridge. Other side and back up. Get inside the ridge. No metal showing, very good. That means no yarn will show. We pull it. Give it a good yank. Stretch, make sure that yarn's not going anywhere. And then snip it. Okay, so that is the one drawback of this method, is you do wind up with lots of ends of sewing. So at the top and bottoms of each set of 2 that you attach, and then, you know, depending on how long your rows are, that could be, you know, another 2 over here, then another 2 over here, you know. And then when you start doing your rows like we're about to do now, then you have to sew in the ends on either end of the row. So it does get to be a lot of sewing. But we want to make sure that our ridges are both on the outside, because that's where our ridge is going to go when we put in our new stitches, and we want all the ridges on the same side. So the ridges on the outside, and line up your 2 rows. attach at the corner. Again, your squares are the same size, so you have the same number of stitches, and you just have to line them up properly and go through both parts of the stitch on both stitches. Make sure you have both bees on your hook. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Same thing right down the line. Right through the space on your chain 2 spaces. Make sure you do 2 if you did 2. If you chain 2 to make the space, and you stitch 2 when you stitch the space. And again, if you have, it's a little easier with a short row like this where I'm only doing 2 squares, but if you have a longer row and it's harder to keep it lined up, locking stitch markers, safety pins, even little scrap pieces of yarn you can use to tie in, just anything to keep the corners lined up, anything that'll help you keep it in line. You don't have to do it all just by holding it and eyeballing it. It's easier to do it that way when you have a short round like this, just the 2 squares, but it's not always easy when it gets longer, so. Right through your corner. When you get here, you're just going to jump over to the next space. You're going to put 2 in the corner. It's kind of attached on in your middle one, so that was your 3rd. So you had 2 left there. And you just keep going right down to the end, and then you're finished. You've got your intersecting ridges. The second method I'm going to show you is the sewing method, which is what was used to make this halter top. As you can see, the seams here are very smooth. There is no ridging visible at all, and that goes for both sides. On either side, it's nice and smooth, no matter which way you look at it. For the sew method, again, you want to make sure your squares are facing the same way. And you want to cut the length of string that you're going to need to sew with. I generally just make sure that it's longer than the width that I'm going for by at least a few inches. Try to make it longer than I'll need it rather than shorter. That's, always be generous with your estimation so you don't run out. And we attach on right in the middle of the corner, so that middle chain of your chain 3, and you only use 1 loop. Instead of going through the whole stitch like we did with the single crochet, we go through just the single loop. You pull it down, give yourself a little bit of a tail to sew in, tie it tight. Now you're tied on, and you're ready to sew. Again, you just line them up. We take just that 1 loop, that one loop. Try to pick up from underneath, which is easier to do if you have this bent style needle. This is a Knitter's Pride needle I got from Thimbleberries. And again, mine might look a little sloppy because I'm using a different color and you're supposed to do this in the same color. But I want you to see what I'm doing, so it's okay. It's a little sloppy. As long as you can follow it. You see how it's coming together nice and smooth? There's no ridging on either side. One side's kind of open because you're only using the one loop, but it's still smooth, kind of indented, and then the other one's flat, flush together. And you really just continue working that same way all the way to the bottom and knot off. The last method I want to share with you may seem a bit overwhelming, like I'm throwing a little too much information at you at once here, but I promise you can do it. If you can make a granny square, you can use this continued joining together method. It's really just building this outer layer of your square while at the same time conjoining to another square. So you're building them up as you connect them. It's basically doing this plus slip stitches. It's a little bit confusing at sometimes, like when you get to what we do at the corners and whatnot, but I'd say your best bet with learning this one, get out a piece of paper and a pencil, take a few notes on the few parts that differ from just doing a square round, and once you start doing it, you'll realize it's really not as complicated as it sounds. Okay, so opinions may vary on this one. You know, the person I learned this method from said once they learned it, they were absolutely in love. They never wanted to use any other method. I did one blanket and said, wow, that was a lot of work, and I don't see me using this often. So, yeah, y'all might not love it, but maybe you will. This is the continuous join as you go method. And you attach your yarn on here. Tail out of the way. Chain. Two more, so you have a chain 3, attach on with a chain 3, and then do 2 double crochets. So what you basically just did there is put half of your corner in. So when we come back around and finish this edge, we'll put in the last 3 doubles and the chain. And then you're going to work around up until this corner, just like you were doing a round of your granny square. So chain 2, 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet, chain 3, 3 double crochet in the corner. So you get to this corner, and then the last corner, you're only going to put 3, just like here. You do half the corner. Okay? Just exactly like your granny round. Now, if you watched last week's video, this should be very familiar to you, and I shouldn't be going too fast for you, but if you didn't, this could be... Also, if you're working on connecting granny squares, you should know how to make a granny square round, right? Can't connect them if you don't know how to make them. And that's all we're doing right now. So hopefully this part isn't going by too fast. Okay, so you get to this last corner. Like I said, we're going to put in our 3 double crochet. You're not going to finish the corner though. We're just going to do those 3. So if you lay it back down, what you have here, so this is where you started, and you worked up and over and down, and our last bottom edge is left unworked. Now we're going to chain 3, and we're going to pick up our next square, and we're working into that bottom corner. We're going to do 3 double crochet. This is hard to do on camera. And we're going to, so the corners away, slip stitch into this chain space. And we're going to chain 2, and we're going to work into this space. Just the same kind of cluster we would do if we were working it normally. The 3 doubles. After we put them in, we're going to slip over on this side. And then we chain 2. Chain 2 and 3 double crochets here. We're at the corner. Here we do not slip together. We just work our corner normally. So our bottom corners are just half done. They're not fully done. And our cluster spaces are slipped together, attaching up the sides. Our corners are open. And now we're gonna continue our pattern over and down here. Again, only doing half the corner, chaining 3 and picking up our next square. And we will again work up the sides, slipping the clusters together, work the corner normally, leaving it loose. And we're just going to end right here in this corner. We're not going to do this side. We're going to end at the top corner with 3 double crochet, just doing halves like we did at the bottom over here. So work around, over, up, and I'll meet you back there. Okay, so our first row is done. And you can see we worked, starting where our tail is, we worked up, over, down, over, and up, attaching here. We left our corners loose, worked over, down, over, back up, and over again. And again, left these corners loose, but we attached by our clusters. Okay, so the first row is simple enough, right? That we can all follow that. It's basically following the granny pattern around and then these slip stitches to connect and leaving this bottom half undone. Now we chain 3. Okay, so we attach on the bottom corner with 3 double crochets. I didn't wrap. With 3 double crochets. 1, 2. Oh, I'm off camera. 3. Okay, and then we slip into the chain space just like we did on our sides. Chain 2 and 3 into the chain space again, just like on a granny round, only with the slip to attach. And again, slip into the chain space. Chain. And now we're at the corner. I do 3 double crochets. Going off cam. Okay, so we got our 3 double crochets in. Now we're going to chain 1. And when we do our corners, we're going to attach to the diagonal opposite corner, not to the one right under it. The diagonal opposite. So that one's going to be, that's going to stay loose. Get that just out of your way for now. Diagonally, we're going to slip stitch. And chain 1 again. Okay. And now we can attach our next square. With, again, 3 double crochets. Bottoms of the squares we're only ever doing half the corner. Come back and finish the other half. And slip, chain 2, and 3 double crochets in the cluster, or in the chain 2 space for the cluster, making the cluster. Okay, and slip again, just like we do on the sides. Now we're in the middle working on a bottom of a square and the top of another. And we're at our corner again. So again, 3 double crochets, and then we chain 1. Diagonal corner, not the one right under, that stays out of the way. Slip and chain 1 again. So see how we're attaching just on the bottoms of this row of squares? Right now we're gonna work around them. But first we attach all 3 of them by the bottom. When you get to your last square, of course, there is no diagonal to it because it's the final row, so you will be attaching to the square just directly below it. If this seems like a bit much, like I'm throwing too much information at you, or it just seems very confusing with how much you have to turn your work to keep track of what you're doing, you know, don't worry about it. It's fine. This series is for beginners. If you're new at this and this is just too complicated for you right now, stick with the other methods that I showed you for now. You know, take some notes on this, maybe save the video to watch again later, and, you know, try it when you're ready. You don't have to try anything that's too complicated at this stage. You know, you work at your own pace. Do the complicated stuff when you're ready for it. You know, it isn't as confusing as it seems, really, because this is just working a granny round and slipping for the most part, but these corner parts, you know, it's a little confusing how you do it, so I could see how it could seem overwhelming for a newbie. So like I said, if it is too much, don't feel bad, just stick to the simpler methods for now and try it later. So we're at our corner. This one, because it is our outside edge and we're on our last one, we are attaching just directly below. But you slip, chain one, and finish your corner. So now we finished that corner, we are starting to work our way up this side, which, because we don't have anything to attach to, it's the outer edge, it's going to be like a normal granny side. So chain 2, 3 here, normal corner, chain 2, work around here. This will be a normal corner, and you come back down here. I'll show you how to pick up this one. So just work around here. It's just a normal granny round, and I'll meet you back here. Okay, so I'm on my last cluster before the corner, and I've turned my work. There will be a lot of turning the work in this process. You come up to this corner and do this, you know, you finish this cluster, you chain 2, and then you put your other 3 double crochets in to finish that corner. You have 3 down here, that was the bottom of your corner. Now you're doing the side of your corner. So you've got your 3 double crochets. You're going to chain 1 and you're going to pull that loop loose and take your hook out. I know, getting complicated here. This loose corner down here at a diagonal from where you're at, put your hook through there, and under this chain 1 that from where we attach those 2 corners, grab that loop back on your hook, and pull it through that space that you set the whole thing you set your hook through, and slip. Then you're going to chain 2, and then you're going to go to your next unfinished corner over here. So you just finished this one. This is your next unfinished one. You have 3 in the bottom. You're going to put 3 on the side here. 3 double crochets. I know that was a little confusing, but we're going to do it again when we get over to this corner, so you get to see it twice. And, you know, you could always write it down or take notes. rewind and rewatch. I'm gonna slip, chain 2, in the cluster, just like we've been doing on our sides. And now, for me, this is my last row. If this was not my last row, I would leave the corners loose, just like I did on row 1. But because it is my last row, I'm going to slip stitch on my corner as well. Because this is going to be a nice finished edge for me now. Around in the corner. I do this last side. We slip when you do this side, not on this one. This one we're just working down the side. Okay, so we've got our 3 double crochets. I'm going to chain 1 and pull it loose. I'm going to go through this corner and under here, grab that loop, pull it through. Sometimes when you turn your work, you get your working yarn not where you want it. It should be down here underneath. Okay, so you pull it a little snug. Slip right through there. Chain 2. And then right into this corner. So one more time for you. Let's try that again. So you got your 3 double crochets, you chain 1. You left that chain loose up here. Come under your corner, underneath this row, grab that loop, pull it under, yarn over and just slip right through there, and then chain 2. And yarn over and into this next square's unfinished corner. We do our 3 double crochet and slip, chain 2, 3 double crochet, and remember on the corner, you only slip together on your last row. This is my last row, so I'm slipping it together. But if this was not your last row, you'd leave it open like we did on the first row and pick up the flaps on your next row the same way we did on the second one. So 3 double crochet, slip into the corner, chain 3, 3 double crochet, and continue around. I'm going to work until I get here and then show you how we pick up these spaces as we go around. You still with me? I know I just threw a lot at you, but we are almost finished, I promise. And this is a great time to take a quick breather, have a little sip of your coffee, tea, whatever you have handy. And great time for me to remind you, if this is in any way confusing, if you have any questions, you can post the questions in the comments below, and I will either answer you through text in the comment itself, or if it would be easier to show you than tell you, I could make a video, going more into detail on this. Do not hesitate to ask on any of my videos. Anytime that anything is unclear, if I go through something too quickly for you, just comment and let me know. All right. Are we caffeinated and ready to jump back into this? We're almost done. Just one more little tricky bit. You see, we have these chain 3 spaces where we attach going around. I got to show you how to pick those up. And other than that, it's just working like a granny all the way around. So, almost done. Real simple. Let's get back to it. All right, so go up to our last corner of that square. And we just have to do half the corner because the other half's done down here. So 3 doubles. Now we've got this chain 3 space here. We chain 1, we slip into that space, and we chain 1 again. And then we just continue. So this corner, we just need to finish it off with 3 double crochets. 1, 2, 3. Chain 2, 1, 2, 3 into the chain 2 space, chain 2. This corner we work all the way around like a normal corner. Chain 3. Now we're finishing off that bottom edge. This is where we started. And we're just finishing off that bottom edge and we are done. It's, yeah. Doing a small sample to start is probably a good idea because on a larger blanket it takes quite a bit more time before you find yourself back at that finishing tail, and it can seem like a lot. When I think about it, it's really not. You know, this is building on your last round of your squares as you connect them. So if you had just built the whole square like you did with these ones and then connected them, that's just as many rows of work. It's just doing that and then attaching instead of doing it while attaching, so you kind of break up the work a little bit so it's not as right on top of itself, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like that's why it seems like less work, but it's really not. Anyway, back to this point where we chain one, we slip into this chain 3 space, and we chain 1 again. And again, 3 doubles to finish off this corner. Okay, so we are back to where we started. We put in our 3 double crochets, chain 3, slip into the top of the 3rd chain that started this whole mess. And you cut your working yarn, which I already did. I had to reshoot. Technical difficulties. Okay, so you tie off, and now you've got your 2 finishing, your starter tail and your finishing tail both in the same spot. And those are the only tails you have to sew in. And you've got all of your squares attached. Now, I know I just threw a lot at you, but you don't have to master all 3 methods at one go. You can start with whichever one seemed ideal to you and work your way from there. My personal favorite is the first one I showed you, the single crochet. I like that how it's textured on one side and smooth on the other. It gives you 2 different looks. It's versatile. I'm a big fan of that one. That last one I showed you, less ends to sew in. If you're not a big fan of sewing ends, you know, try to learn it. I know it's long, but again, it's repeating the granny square pattern for the most part. And I think if you slow the video down and rewatch it a couple times, it'll come clearer as you go. So, this concludes our granny squares. You now have all the information you need to make your first blanket. Like, that's all this is a tiny, tiny, like doll-sized blanket. Make it bigger. More squares across, more up, more rows up, and you have yourself a blanket. So, you can go make your first blanket, or you can continue watching this beginner series and learn how to make a flat circle, which can be used as the base for a bag. It can be used for a coaster. It can be used for a hot pad. But the most important part for why I'm showing it to beginners is it teaches you how to increase. So, technical skills that we will need down the line. Catch me next week to learn how to make a flat circle. I'll see you then.